There are many definitions of logic as a field of study, but at its most basic, understanding logic can be defined as the study of argument. This doesn't mean two sides arguing at each other, like you might expect from even a political debate, but rather an argument is an example of reasoning in which one or more statements are offered as evidence for another statement. The statement being supported is the conclusion of the argument, and the statements that support it are the premises of the argument. In the lack of female logicians in logic textbooks, the premise appears to be that there are no female logicians. However, there have been female logicians who have contributed to breakthroughs in logic. Let's say, there have been female logicians is denoted by P. And let's say, they have contributed to breakthroughs in logic is denoted by Q. So let's say we are trying to prove that if there are female logicians, then they have contributed to breakthroughs in logic. This sentence can therefore be denoted by if P, then Q. The premise, there are no female logicians, is therefore denoted by not P. Now that we have our language, we can complete a simple derivation to prove it using conditional introduction. In order to reach our conclusion, if P, then Q, we need to set up a subderivation that has the assumption P and the ending Q. However, in order to get there, we need to find Q. We can do this by assuming its opposite, not Q, in a nested subderivation. From P and not P, we can use conjunction introduction to make P and not P, which is a contradiction. From this contradiction, we can conclude the opposite of our assumption not Q with not Q. Using negation elimination, we can then turn not Q into Q. This completes our original subderivation, and we can therefore conclude if P, then Q. Remember, if P, then Q is our denotation for if there are female logicians, then they have made contributions to breakthroughs in logic. So we have proven that if there are hypothetically female logicians, then they would hypothetically have made contributions to breakthroughs in logic. However, in the study of logic, we hear frequently about the ancient philosophers Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, Confucius. Even in the study of modern logic, we hear about logicians Leibniz, Boole, Russell, Wittgenstein, Hilbert, Loewenheim, and Kripke. Something that all of these well-recorded breakthroughs have in common, they are all done by men. But it seems a little illogical that all these logical breakthroughs have been done solely by men. This isn't to say that men are the only ones who can make breakthroughs in logic, but it is indicative of a society that not only doesn't respect the work of women and gender minorities, but also gave women and gender minorities greater obstacles to overcome in order to make those breakthroughs. Why are we taught less about female logicians? If women did not have access to higher education, then textbooks would contain less information about female logicians. If there are less female logicians, then any breakthrough by a female logician is more revolutionary. One example of a logician and psychologist who made breakthroughs primarily in psychology, but we may view her path to education as revolutionary in its own way. Christine Ladd Franklin was taught at a young age that women deserve to have the same opportunities as men when her mother and aunt took her to suffragette meetings. However, when she attended Vassar College, she faced obstacles from her father, who did not feel that it was worth sending a daughter to higher education. She later applied to go to graduate school at Johns Hopkins, signing her application with her first initial C. She was accepted and offered a fellowship because it was thought that she was a man. Her fellowship was almost revoked, and she was only permitted to take classes under one professor. Because women were not allowed to graduate from Hopkins, she was not awarded her PhD until 44 years after she earned it. She was the first woman to receive a PhD in logic and mathematics. Ladd Franklin faced many obstacles in her quest to higher education in logic. Although she was awarded her degree 44 years late, she was still the first woman to receive a PhD in her fields and was thus revolutionary in her own way. Now that we have framed the revolutionary context that is the existence of female logicians, we can also discuss the breakthroughs that female logicians have done. Ruth Barkin Marcus was an American logician who went on to develop the Barkin formula, She was considered a pioneer in the quantification of modal logic and theory of direct reference. She also conducted research on identity, essentialism, possibilia, belief, and moral conflict. Ruth Barkin Marcus's earliest published work was the publication of the first axiomatic study of modal logic with quantifiers in 3 groundbreaking articles in the Journal of Symbolic Logic. The widely discussed Barkin formula is introduced as an axiom in quantified modal logic. The aforementioned articles were the first systems of quantified modal logic, which extended some propositional modal systems of Clarence Irving Lewis to first and second order, a major accomplishment in the development of 20th century logic. Lewis gives Marcus special recognition in his article, Notes on the Logic of Intention. Here, Lewis recognizes Ruth Barkin Marcus as the first logician to extend propositional logic as a higher order of intentional logic. Emily Elizabeth Constance Jones was an English logician. She was able to attend higher education, but her brother's education took priority over her own, often delaying her entry into university and causing several interruptions throughout. She worked primarily in philosophical logic and ethics. She was considered a prized student by all of her educators. Her first significant contribution to logic is her application of the intension-extension distinction to singular terms. Widely regarded as an authority on philosophical logic, she became well-published and in 1896 became the first woman to present a paper at the Cambridge Moral Sciences Club. Jones was cited by other major logicians, especially for her publication, Elements of Logic as a Science of Propositions. Her major publication, A New Law of Thought and Its Logical Bearings, was published in 1911 by Cambridge University Press, and critics cited her as having made a major discovery. Major male logicians wrote response pieces to much of her works, and young logicians at the time studied her works. Although she was a very visible member in the philosophical community in England during her life, she is now almost entirely forgotten. Some of the responses to her work, written by male logicians, are still studied today. So why are female logicians so easily forgotten? A simple feminist argument would say that it is because the work of women and gender minorities are undervalued and generally go unrepresented. These female logicians made significant breakthroughs in the field of logic, and much of their work is continually undervalued. However, there are a few aspects one must consider, even though these female logicians faced many obstacles. All of the female logicians discussed earlier were born wealthy and affluent and with the funds necessary to access higher education, though with much difficulty at times. All of these women were white and able-bodied, and also had many of the connections necessary to succeed with mentors and publishing journals. Our original statement was, if there are female logicians, then they have contributed to breakthroughs in logic. In conclusion, we can see that not only did female logicians contribute to breakthroughs in the field of logic, they also overcame many obstacles and were revolutionary in their own right as being female logicians.